What is going on, YouTube? Northeast Ohio here for a little video discussion. Gonna have a little chit chat today, a little chitty chat. We're gonna talk about buying and selling. It's the question I get asked more than anything else in YouTube comments, on Discords, just in general. When do I buy? When do I sell? Etc. Etc. So I'm gonna kind of go over how my processes are, and just some general thoughts on the whole buying and selling thing. So, real quick, before we get into that, YouTube nonsense down below. Like, comment, sub, do your stuff, ask questions, do your thing. Market movers links down below, obviously coupon code, etc., etc. Today we're going to be using market movers, but I'm going to be showing, we're going to be living in the my collection tool, which I don't think I've really shown a lot on the channel, because it tracks all your buying and selling for any cards loaded into the market mover system. So when you buy a card, if it's in their popular card charts, you can add it into your my collection with the date that you purchased it, the price that you paid. It tracks all your profit and loss for that card. And then you can take it a step further, mark it when you sold it. It'll automatically keep track of all your profits and losses on that side as well. Very handy little tool. We're not going to get into all the necessarily details on it, but when you see me clicking around, we are in the my collection thing on market movers, because I'm going to use a few personal examples that I have when we talk about this. So last thing before we get into it, thanks. We got over 2K subs, actually blew past 2K subs. We were right at 2K subs when I posted the Sunday video, or late last week. We were just barely below 2K subs. We blew through that, and we're almost at, by the time this gets posted, probably over 2,100 subs. So you guys are crushing it on the sub button. Click like buttons, leave comments, all that jazz. So let's get into buying and selling. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible and keep this as loosey-goosey as possible, but we will see what happens. So let's talk about buying first, because I think that's the simpler one. When it comes to buying and selling, really both, I just have a general tenet. And I heard this on, and I don't know where it originated from, but I stole it from a fantasy baseball podcast that I listened to years and years ago on MLB.com. And that is, don't confuse the outcome with the decision. And this can be applied in a ton of different walks of life. So the basic premise of this is fairly obvious. If you have a good process going in and you follow that process and something goes wrong, did it go wrong because of the process, or did it go wrong because it was something out of your control? So I like to use real world examples. So let's use one. In the my collection tool here, we see this nice little Ben Simmons optic PSA 10. I purchased it on 7/28 for $250. The reason I made this purchase was because I worked through my process and it said that it was a good buy. At the time, let's go back, Philly was a trendy team heading into the NBA bubble. Ben Simmons' Prism prices had shot way up and his optic had lagged behind. We talk about this all the time on the channel. This is normal. Prism leads the charge, then optic follows. This was one of those windows where the optic was way cheap compared to the Prism PSA 10. I don't remember the price of the Prism PSA 10 at the time. It was out of my price range at that time. But the optic was in one of those perfect positions. My plan was, and I always say this, when you buy a card, have a plan going in, was to buy it for $250 and then hopefully sell it for like around $350 once the playoffs actually started. I was buying this during that like little 8-game run up that they had before the actual playoffs started. So I bought it because it was undervalued. I purchased it. It came within a day of it coming to me. He hurts his knee and the entire Sixers team falls apart. He's out for the rest of the bubble. See you in whenever the hell the 2020 season starts at that point in time. Card price tanks. Perfect example of don't confuse the outcome with the decision. The outcome was the card went down $100. The decision process, in my theory, was correct. I followed my steps. I used data to back it up. I didn't follow the hype or whatever. I didn't buy it because someone told me to buy it, et cetera, et cetera. But I just got unlucky. It happens. If you're in this game long enough, stuff like this is going to happen. This is a case of don't confuse the outcome with a decision. Let's look at one more, and that's Odell Beckham Jr. This is a case where it's a little bit of both. I bought into the hype on the whole wide receiver craze in the preseason of the NFL. Now, I used data to make my purchases, but the flaw was that I bought into the hype of the whole wide receiver craze. I even talked about it on the channel. Hey, that this might be something we're going to look into. I recommended buying Odell Beckham Jr. stuff based on the data. But it was hype driven in regards to the wide receivers being the hot thing this year in the NFL card market because of all the new blood and all these new sports card investors from the NBA market. They're going to be buying NFL stuff and they're going to be saying, why are these wide receivers so cheap? And you know what? For a hot minute, it was right. And then the NFL actually started playing games and everyone remembered why we only stick to quarterbacks. Because these guys started dropping like flies. Now quarterbacks got hurt too, but quarterbacks consistently put up numbers. Running backs and wide receivers don't. Running backs get hurt left and right. And wide receivers, other than a few, are very up and down on their production. They can go 2 or 3 weeks with having mediocre games and then have monster games 2 weeks in a row. And the card market doesn't like that. It's a very overreactionary market. So this was a case where I bought into the hype. Now I used good data to make purchases, but the flaw was the hype. And now this got doubly worse because he tore his ACL. That was out of my control. But these cards I was already at a loss on very quickly into the season just based off his play and Baker Mayfield's play. So this is an example where I bought into the hype. I did use data to make the purchases, but the flaw was the hype. And it's hard to separate that stuff sometimes. The general rules of thumb for football are just stick to quarterbacks. I broke that rule. Now, I didn't go so far as going to running backs like a lot of people did. Everyone was telling me to buy Saquon Barkley in the preseason. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. This does not make sense. I stuck to my guns, but I could see it on the wide receiver side. Now, a couple wide receivers this year have paid off. DK Metcalf and a few others. But for the most part, it's been very hit or miss. The NFL market in general this year has been very, very up and down. So that's kind of the opposite side of, I kind of used my process, but I broke away from it. So for you personally, you need to figure out what's your process. Are you making data driven purchases or are you just buying because some idiot like myself on YouTube tells you to? When I post a video that says 5 undervalued cards that you should be buying now, it's because I'm using data to back that up. Now, in your process, you should do your own homework, regardless whether it's me telling you, PSA collector, sports card investor, whoever, hobby box, whatever. Pick whatever random talking head on the internet that you want to talk about, including myself. Whenever one of us makes a recommendation for a buy or whoever you follow or whatever, you need to look at that yourself and make a decision and see if this adds up. I try as personally as much as possible in videos to stay away from just randomly tossing names out there. I try to show this is why I am buying this card because the numbers show X, Y, or Z. And in my mind, that's why it makes this card a good buy. In general, that has worked out well for me. Things like this Ben Simmons are going to happen. So your process should be to take in data from everywhere and then do your own research and make a call. I always say you need to have access to something, whether it's market movers or card ladder or card genie or whatever. There's a million of them out there now. Pick the one that suits you the best. I think market movers is the best. That's why I use it. That's why I use it on the channel. And that's why I recommend them. But as long as you're using something and you're comfortable with it, you can make data-driven decisions. That's what you should be doing when you're buying. You should not be buying into the hype. You should not be buying in the FOMO, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm strictly talking from an investing / making money standpoint. If you were doing this as a collector, this is an entirely different conversation. So let's just push that off to the side. If you're PCing Baker Mayfield, we're in a whole different ballgame than we are if I'm looking to buy Baker Mayfield to make money off of him and flip. That's the primary focus of what we're talking about. So make data-driven decisions. Don't buy into something just because me or whoever tells you it's a good deal. Take that information, do your own research, and then make a decision. Everyone's budgets are different. Everyone's lives are different. And then when you buy a card, have a plan. You're buying this to sell when, if everything works out correctly. A month, 2 months, 6 months. I will tell you right now, in general, and this is going to start to transition over to the selling side of things. I think there are only a select handful of players in how I operate. There's only about 4 or 5 players that I want to be holding for long term. And I use long term in air quotes. When I say long term in the NBA market, sports card market, I am talking like beyond this season. Everything else to me is I'm looking a month to 3 to 4 months ahead. Like I am probably most likely looking to sell it before the playoffs start for the following season or this upcoming season. So for example, we are right now 3.5 weeks away from the season starting. I'm starting to break my stuff down into groups. Things I want to sell before the season starts, things I want to sell during the season / into the lead up to the playoffs, and then things that I'm probably not going to sell this season. Obviously, things change. Every plan is a good plan until first contact with the enemy type of stuff. Things are going to pop up. Things are going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. But I at least have a plan going in, and I know what I'm looking to do. And for those curious, the players are Luka, Trey, Ja, Tatum, and Giannis. And I'm talking of the newer breed. Obviously, LeBron and guys like that are kind of a little bit of a different story. Your Currys, your Durants, those type of guys. I'm talking about the younger guys like the last 3 to 4 years. Now, Giannis goes back a little farther than that, but those are the 5 that I am looking to hold long term. Anyone outside of those 5, to me, I would not hesitate to sell in season if I made a good profit on it. That's just me. Maybe you're different. People will say, well, what about Donovan Mitchell? Sure, maybe he's on your list. He's not on mine. I think he's capped by the Utah market. And he played about as well as he possibly could last year. And I think we've seen the ceiling for his cards. The Jazz, sorry, Jazz fans, are never going to win an NBA title with him on the roster. It is what it is. It is what it is. They are a very good Western Conference playoff team every single year, currently constructed, but they're probably not going to win an NBA championship anytime soon. It just is what it is. Utah, sorry. Sorry, Jazz fans. Tatum, one of the best young players in the league. Luka, obviously. I mean, we're not going to go through these guys individually, but you get the point. Those are the handful of guys that I am not selling pretty much no matter what. I would hold those into the season. Once again, unless you need money. If you need money to sell off and buy something else, I get it. And I might sell off some of their stuff to buy other things. That's perfectly fine if I have duplicates of cards, and we'll talk about that in a second. Maybe I sell one off to upgrade. Maybe I sell off 2 Luka Optic PSA 10s to buy an Optic Hollow, whatever. But if I sell Luka, I'm probably looking to put that money back into Luka, if that makes sense. I would rather sell other things and put that into Luka, but it is what it is. So outside of those couple of guys, everything to me in the NBA market is short term, whether that's a week or 18 weeks. I don't look really beyond the upcoming playoffs. That right before the playoffs start is a lot where a lot of these guys' values max out. Guess what, guys? The season starts in 3 weeks. Card prices are going to immediately go down on some guys. Right now, everything's hunky-dory. No one's playing. No one's touching a basketball. No one's tested positive for COVID, et cetera, et cetera. Everything's good. Everything's good. Prices are going up left and right. Everything's good. What's going to happen when RJ Barrett comes out and maybe just starts a little cold? Prices are going to tank. This is one of the most overreactionary markets ever. So if you can lock in good profits on guys, don't hesitate to do that. Have your stack of long-term holds. Maybe it's not the same as mine. You have your own. Set those off to the side and ride the waves. Everybody else to me should be in play, that once you lock in good profit on them, you move off of them. Keep churning. To me, the NBA sports card market is all about the churn when it comes to selling. You lock in your 20 to 30% on these random dudes, make the money, rinse, repeat, move on to the next one, and then use that money to buy nicer stuff for the players that you do want to hold long term, or just use it to keep buying more stuff and essentially expand your inventory of flip stuff. So let's talk about where this is led us in the selling, essentially. So my general approach to selling is I like to mitigate risk as much as possible. And how I do that is either by buying multiples, or when a card spikes, selling some of them off and then holding the rest. And I have an example of this. So we're in the the sold section on, or I'm sorry. So let's look at the My Collection tool again, and let's look at Michael Porter Jr. So right as he was going crazy in the bubble and his prices shot up, I bought a PSA 10 red, white, and blue for $200. At the time that I purchased this card was the day that he was going off. It might have been the first day or the second day that he was going off for back-to-back 30-point games. The card prices were spiking literally by the minute that night because he was going nuts. And they were wiped out on eBay. I hopped on my slabs and got this, and I actually thought the guy wasn't going to ship it to me because the prices had gone up almost $75 within essentially that night. So I have this MPJ red, white, and blue to me on the way. Also, I own 6 base prisms raw of MPJ that I bought back in February for fractions of what they were currently going for at the time. So let me look at sold listings here in this and search for Porter Jr. So you can see I paid an average of $6.70 for these. Most of these were bought back in February when his prices were extremely low. If I break this out, you'll see the individual sales that I made. So I bought that PSA 10 on 8/2. On 8/9, I sold 2 of them for $87 a piece. My thought process was, I have the PSA 10 coming. I have these 6 prisms here. I knew that this was a very overreactionary market. And to me, that price seemed extremely high for Porter Jr. for a raw prism base. This is Michael Porter Jr. we're talking about here. Yeah, I really like Porter Jr. He's one of the other guys, that I would like to hold on to a little bit. But so what I did here was I limited my risk. Now I can hold on to Porter Jr., essentially free rolling him. I had the PSA 10 red, white, and blue. I had 6 base prisms. I went through the base prisms. I pulled one out that looked good for grading. It's sitting at PSA right now. The other 5, I moved off to the side and said, let me see what happens with these. I'm going to look to move some. His prices got up to almost $90 a card. I sold 2 of them. I made $143 off that transaction. Now, yes, I bought them when they were dirt cheap, back for $4 to $5 a piece. So I made a massive profit potential on them. But even if I paid $20 a piece for them, I'm selling them for $90 a pop. So now I'm plus $143 just off those 2, and I still have 3 more. Now I'm into the PSA 10 red, white, and blue for $60. Okay. His prices dip a little bit, et cetera, et cetera. And I go, you know what? I'm going to look to sell some more of these. I sent the one off the PSA that looked the best. And I said, let me just move the rest of these raw now while they're at this price. And then if something goes wrong, I am protected. So all told, I paid $33.50 total for the 5 MPJ base prisms. And I sold them for $320 for a profit of $263. On the other side, I purchased a PSA 10 red, white, and blue prism for $200 and spent, let's call it $30 to grade a base prism raw. So I am in to Michael Porter Jr. for $230. But I sold $263 of Michael Porter Jr. of other stuff I had laying around. So now I essentially have, this is how I think of it. On a spreadsheet, it comes out and it's just numbers. But in my mind, this is how I view this. I have a Michael Porter Jr. PSA 10 red, white, and blue, and a mystery base prism Porter Jr. PSA 9 or 10. I think it's a 10. That's why I sent it. So we'll call it a 9.5. We'll split the difference. Whatever it is. PSA 9, PSA 10. Mystery card. I have those two cards that I paid myself $30 for. So I have a Porter Jr. PSA 10, a mystery Porter Jr. PSA, and $30 profit, all from my Michael Porter Jr. pool. This is how I like to do things. I've done the same thing. We're not going to go into specific examples. I just wanted to use that one because it was the easiest one to show. And I think I explained it quite well. I have the same approach with Zion. If Zion went belly up tomorrow, I would be out. There's an opportunity cost of not selling this stuff, but essentially it wouldn't kill me because I've sold off enough Zion that I'm essentially not out anything when it comes to Zion. I had a PSA 9 silver mosaic prism I pack pulled and sent off for express grading that I sold as soon as I got it back for $900. That's like a $500 card now because this stuff came way down. Now, obviously, he could start the season gangbusters and that card could go bonkers again. Who knows? But I have made enough profit on Zion that the stuff that I am holding, I am essentially free rolling Zion stuff. And I will look to sell. I have a few other Zion pieces that I got back from grading recently that I've been sitting on to sell right before the season starts. So essentially what I'm going to do, and this, replace Zion with whatever player that you want to. Let's call it trendy player that you're not high on. I'm not the biggest believer in Zion, but I also want to protect myself in case maybe he is the second coming. Maybe he's not Sean Kemp 2.0 or Blake Griffin 2.0. Maybe he is the next superstar, MVP, whatever. So I want to stash some of it to hold on to as a just in case, but I also want to protect myself on the backside and lock in some profit. So over the next couple weeks, I'm going to take all my Zion stuff, raw, graded, etc., and do a full inventory. And I'm going to slide things off to the side that I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to hold on to this and I'm going to take the other stuff and sell it before the season starts. If he comes out and he looks like Bane and he's dunking on people and ripping guys' arms off and everything else, his prices are going to go to the moon and I'll still have a small stash of that. If he comes out and looks like he did in the bubble, his prices are going to tank and they're going to tank fast. The biggest thing with these high pop count cards like Zion based Prism is when they fall quick because everyone starts to undercut each other. So when the prices drop on these guys, that's why you see them drop so fast. Everyone wants to get out, and there's so many of them out there that everyone keeps undercutting each other to make the sale and get out when stuff goes sideways. That's why you see these prices nosedive in a hurry. So I'm trying to get ahead of that and protect myself. If he goes crazy, did I leave money on the table by selling Zion in early to mid-December? Maybe I did. But I'll still have a small little stash that I've essentially paid nothing for. So if he does go crazy, I'm free rolling whatever it is I decide to hang on to. So that's how I like to approach this. I like to get multiples of whatever it is that I'm buying. If I'm that adamant about it that it's a good buy, I'm going to try to buy more than one of them. At least two. Because then you can cover yourself a little bit. Maybe you buy two cards for $100 a piece. They jump to 150, 200. You could sell the one and then hold on to the other one long term if you want to. Or you could be a little more riskier with it because you've eliminated the risk other than the opportunity cost of not selling it in the first place and locking in the previous profit. And don't just sell to sell. When you sell, why are you selling? Are you going to take that money and put it into something else? Like, do you need the funds to be more liquid so you could buy other things to flip? Or are you just getting it because the price got so high and you don't really know what you're going to do with it besides stick it in a bank? And that's fine too. That's viable. But at least have a general idea of why are you selling this card. And like I said, on the buy side, have a plan for when you're going to buy it. Why are you buying this card? And at what point are you thinking you're going to get out of it? And obviously, circumstances change. That needs to be weighed into the equation, but at least have a general plan for it. Um, so I hope this kind of answered some questions for you guys. I don't know if it answered any questions, but at least gave you insight into my thought processes when it comes to how I handle this stuff, especially on the selling side, because I do think that's the side that's trickier. Buying to me is easy. The data drives the buy. You look at the numbers and, the data makes a decision on the buy. There's no data that makes a decision for you when to sell because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's no chart you can look at necessarily that says, yeah, Luka PSA 10 Prism is going to keep going up, or that Ben Simmons isn't going to tear a knee ligament or whatever. That stuff just happens, or that the market's going to fall out. Yeah, that stuff could happen when you're looking at the data on the buy side too, I guess, but the buying to me is simpler. It's a lot easier to make these calls to buy something than it is when to sell it, because you're afraid that you're going to sell it and it's going to quadruple. You hear the stories about, I bought Luka at, $50 for a PSA 10 2 years ago, and sold it for 300, and now it's an almost $2,000 card. Is that stuff going to happen? If you're in this game long enough, it absolutely is. You just have to have the mental mindset to move past it and deal with it and know that it's going to happen. You're going to lose on some of those, but as long as you made a profit on the front end, then you should be happy with that. As long as you hit whatever the number it is that you had in mind, then you just move on and forget about it and move on to the next thing. So that's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, just kind of wanted to get into my machinations, my crazy mind when it comes to buying and selling stuff. But if you have any follow-up questions or whatever, let me know down below. Stay safe out there, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.